Effectivement. Alors, pour le bénéfice de l'auditoire, premièrement, bonjour. Bienvenue au quart de finale ronde 4 de ce matin. Le sujet de ce débat serait qu'il soit résolu que le gouvernement canadien installe un système de péage sur le futur pont Champlain. Be it resolved that the Canadian government installs tolls on the future Champlain Bridge. Alors, sans plus attendre, j'appelle le premier ministre du gouvernement pour une période de 5 minutes, première minute et 30 dernières secondes protégées.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. We are here today to discuss a very important issue. Historically, Montreal has had a huge problem with its infrastructure and urban planning, clearly shown in the current problems that we're having with the Champlain Bridge, the interchanges, the highways. There is an imminent need for change in the way we approach our the construction of our infrastructure. Amongst this new project and incoming of the new Champlain Bridge, we need to ensure that this bridge does not repeat the same mistakes of the current infrastructures built around Montreal. We have seen the success of other provinces with the quality of their roads because of the tolls that are there. There's this distinct correlation between road quality and the presence of tolls. More specifically, this need has arisen from the fact that tolls were removed from Quebec a few decades ago, which caused a problem in the future of the funding and reparations of specifically the bridge itself. We recognize that the government made a mistake 30 years ago, and we are here today to fix this problem. For this reason, the government motions to install tolls on the future Champlain Bridge. Now, I'm here today to take you through the reasons why we believe this motion will pass. First of all, we want to ensure adequate maintenance of the new infrastructure and ensure our top priority, the security of our citizens. We need to fix error of removing the toll based on historical tolls in Montreal. And thirdly, federal bridges in Montreal, this federal bridge is the only one that does not have a toll in Canada. And we cannot favoritize. So let me move forward with our first point. We need to ensure adequate maintenance of the new infrastructure. Because of the lack of funding of the Champlain Bridge, in its current state, it has caused many damages, which have in turn caused even more traffic and a lot of worrisome citizens. We also need to ensure that this new bridge does not have the same problems as the current bridge, because we do know that the current bridge is causing many problems. So why is this so important to us? We need to ensure the security of our people. That is the main problem here. We need to ensure the security. This project needs to happen as soon as possible because we do know that the Champlain Bridge is in a critical state. We also need to look at the history of our tolls and reconsider the benefits of these tolls. We know that all the rest of Canada has tolls and it has been functioning really well for them because they do have better quality of infrastructure than we do in Quebec. So why not have tolls? There were tolls through the province of Quebec, and since there are no longer tolls, we are seeing crumbling bridges, crumbling infrastructure, and very low quality of roads. We do see that there's a solution right in front of us, and this is why we believe that a toll on the Champlain Bridge is the necessary solution. So how are we going to implement this? The toll will be approximately $2, which will ensure that the traffic that crosses over this bridge will not deflect to other bridges, because it's very important to us that we continue to have the same flow of traffic throughout this whole project. Obviously, trucks will be charged more per, they will be charged per axle, and buses will not need to pay because we really want to encourage transport en commun, sorry. We really want to encourage transport en commun, and this will do so with the tolls. So this money will go back to the maintenance, and as the government, we want to promise that these funds made by the tolls will solely go into the infrastructure and inspection of the bridge. We are really confident that this toll will not have an impact on our fellow Canadians as they are accustomed to tolls and have seen some before, and we want to make sure that the flow of traffic will remain the same with our $2 toll. So let's look at what we discussed here today. This motion needs to happen because we want to ensure that there is an adequate maintenance of the new infrastructure. We want to fix the error of removing the toll that we have done in the past, because historically we have made a mistake and we are here today to fix this mistake. Mr. Speaker, we are asking you here today that this motion needs to pass. Thank you.
Je laisse maintenant la parole au chef de l'opposition pour une période de 5 minutes, première minute et 30 dernières secondes protégées.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So we on-site opposition believe a toll on the Champlain Bridge will not only harm the usefulness of the bridge going forward and harm the economic development of the city of Montreal and surrounding areas, but it will actually impose a higher economic burden on the people who are least able to pay. That's new families living in the South Shore, people who have mortgages, etc. But before I get into our substantive material and our two arguments, I want to deal with some of the arguments that were brought up by the government, because I think the government really misdiagnosed the problem with infrastructure in Montreal and Quebec as a whole. To rebuild the Champlain Bridge, the Quebec government needs anywhere between $5 to $30 billion. A toll on the Champlain Bridge isn't going to raise $5 to $30 billion in the next year. It's going to raise $5 to $30 billion maybe in the next 30 years, right? Ultimately, what we need to rebuild infrastructure in Quebec is aggressively raising capital, Mr. Speaker. And governments raise capital through a number of means, none of which tolls will actually help with. So we on-site opposition firmly believe that the government can undertake things such as debt financing, such as issuing bonds, working with the federal and municipal governments, or with a public-private partnership to actually raise the necessary capital to rebuild the bridge. And tolls won't actually do anything for the government to raise that kind of capital. Furthermore, we think a large problem with infrastructure in Montreal and Quebec as a whole has been mismanagement of the infrastructure, not necessarily related to the costs, right? Especially in Montreal, we see a lot of problems with corruption, especially with construction companies that are mismanaging the funds they're given. And that's independent of how much money is actually spent on them, right? In fact, like giving more money to these corrupt contractors is necessarily going to increase the level of corruption in and of itself. So fundamentally revamping the ability, like the way we design infrastructure reinforcement and raising more capital will provide all of the benefits they want on their side of the house without imposing an additional economic burden on the citizens of Montreal. So that's what we have in terms of refutation. Two arguments we want to bring you on our side of the house. Firstly, why we think a toll would harm the usefulness of the bridge, and secondly, why this poses an excess economic burden on the wrong people. So why this harms the usefulness of the bridge? Three reasons. Firstly, what we think it'll cause is it'll reroute traffic from the Champlain Bridge to the Jacques Cartier Bridge or the tunnel or any other place, right? Any other way into the city of Montreal. The simple economics dictate that people will try to avoid these costs. In fact, the reason tolls were removed from the province of Quebec was because it rerouted traffic in a bad way. There are like 4 ways to get into the city of Montreal, into the island of Montreal right now. If you make one of them a toll bridge, Mr. Speaker, especially the Champlain Bridge, which is the most used bridge, or the second most used bridge in Canada, all that excess traffic will be rerouted to the bridges that are free, that are free to go through, but don't have the capacity to take on that excess burden. Fundamentally, that'll cause the traffic in the city and congestion to become much, much worse. A good example of this is Toronto, for example, that has 2 highways that access the suburbs. One which is the 407, which is a toll bridge, and the 401, which is a free. Their highway, sorry. The 401, which is free, and the 407, which is toll. The toll highway is rarely used. The free highway is the most used highway in the entire world, and that's necessarily because people don't want to pay these excess costs. Fundamentally, this makes congestion in the city worse. Second reason, we think congestion is bad for the city of Montreal because it harms the economic development of the city, right? When people, especially middle-class people who live in the South Shore, commute to Montreal for their jobs, they're wasting a ton of time in traffic, which is an economic cost in and of itself. But furthermore, people are less likely to travel into the city and actually engage in commerce because they want to avoid the pain that comes with congestion. Ultimately, that harms the amount of commerce that goes in the city, which I think is harmful for the development of the city. Thirdly, the Champlain Bridge is incredibly important in terms of trade with the United States because it's the main route of traffic traffic from the city of Montreal to the United States. So an excess fee on trade with the United States will harm both imports and exports going into the city of Montreal, which harms businesses in the city of Montreal. But furthermore, there's actually a lot of tourism that comes into the city of Montreal from the United States because of the lower drinking age and like the culture in the city of Montreal. And when tourists have to pay a higher fee, less of them will come in. Ultimately, we think a toll on the city of Montreal, the bridge, the Champlain Bridge, will harm the usefulness of the bridge and will actually get a worse usefulness out of that infrastructure if we implement tolls. Second I want to bring up is the excess burden on the wrong people. Because recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the people living in the South Shore today are people who are new families, who are young professionals who have recently graduated from university, who have taken on their first mortgage, that have a ton of university debt, and who are having children. These people have an incredible amount of costs that they already incur for themselves, and the government actually gives them a lot of tax subsidies and stuff. An excess fee on these people who need the money the most will reduce their spending, like their ability to spend on really important necessary things. It will make it much harder, right? These people are the less able to afford these new tolls. Ultimately, we don't think it's good for these people to be have this financial burden put on them. Ultimately, we think it's best not to put a toll on the Champlain Bridge. Thank you.
J'appelle le premier député du gouvernement pour une période de 3 minutes, 30 premières secondes protégées.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hello, dear members of the Assembly, colleagues in the government, and colleagues in the opposition. I will first walk you through today our third point, which is the fairness towards the entire Canadian population. And then I'll walk you through what the opposition just said and explain to you why their concerns are completely unfounded and unrealistic. Now, first of all, we have to consider the fact that the Champlain Bridge and the other federal bridges in Montreal are the only bridges owned by the Canadian government in Canada that do not have tolls. What does this create? It creates an unfairness towards the entire Canadian population who have to pay tolls on other federal bridges across the country. There existed tolls before, and they were taken down. They were taken down for a reason, but they were taken down. But it was a mistake to take them down, and we now realize that, and we say we need to act to fix this mistake. The opposition has said that there are several problems that we brought up, that we won't be able to secure funding for this new bridge, that the government hasn't considered debt financing. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, debt financing is the only way this bridge can be built. The tolls will be used to reimburse this financing. The tolls will only be used for this bridge. So for the purposes of maintaining this bridge and paying back its construction, we are talking of an envelope between $3 and $5 billion for the construction of this bridge. So obviously this money cannot come out of a one-year budget. It has to be financed through debt and then reimbursed through these tolls. The opposition has also tried to sidetrack us by talking about corruption and talking about how we shouldn't be giving money to contractors. Well, to me, Mr. Speaker, what this says to me is that they don't want a new bridge at all. They would rather we just leave a bridge here and have it crumble instead. That makes no sense. We need a new bridge. It's been proven. We need to ensure the security of our citizens. Now we're talking about what we can do to ensure this bridge is properly financed and properly maintained throughout its useful existence. So talking about corruption is completely beside the point. And moreover, the corruption that has occurred throughout decades was due to a lack of oversight, and with everything coming out right now, this is a problem that can easily be dealt with for years to come. They've talked about concerns regarding the usefulness of this bridge. They said that it's going to reroute traffic to other bridges. In a recent survey, Mr. Speaker, of people who use the Champlain Bridge, roughly 30% considered changing to other bridges would a $5 toll be installed on the bridge. We're talking about a $2 toll right now, which is substantially less. And what this tells us is that even with a $5 toll, had it been that high, 70% of users would have continued to use the new Champlain Bridge because they recognize that the increased security and the increased flow of traffic will far outweigh the additional cost to them. We've talked about how this will affect economic development and how it'll negatively impact trade with the United States. We've seen through existing new bridges that use tolls, such as the Autoroute 30, that trucks have shifted toward these highways because they recognize that they are more efficient and they don't mind paying the tolls to benefit from this diminished traffic. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, for the fairness of the population, we must ensure that this bridge is built using tolls. Thank you.
J'appelle le premier député de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, government, fellow opposition, I'm going to bring you two new arguments today. I'm going to finish off with short refutation. The first argument is how the public reaction to this project is as symmetrically vital, is as important as the objective value the government is trying to achieve. Second argument is why we think they're targeting a segment of the population based on their geography and how they are targeting people who have lost a geographic lottery. So the first point, so we think when the government tries to take measures that they think are in the best interest of the population, that they must first of all concede how the public will react. There's an objective value and there's a perceived value. And we on this side of the House believe that the perceived value is a significant value in your decision matrix. It's a necessary value. The Quebec character is to not take things lying down, as we have seen very recently with the tuition initiative, that the Quebec population, when you target them, they will not take things lying down. Second of all, on that point, we think that on this basis, the public reaction with regards to commercialization, you're going to reduce commercialization, that's going to change the public opinion. As well, we think that the real estate value of the South Shore could be affected as well, because people are less likely to move there, especially new families looking for new homes, because it's an additional arbitrary burden that other communities don't have to face. On to my second point. So where you are born and where you live is up to arbitrary chance. It is, in fact, a lottery of where you end up. And we think that the government, by implementing this toll, is targeting a segment of the population that lives specifically on South Shore, because they are reliant on the bridge, and that they need the most access to it, and they have this burden that no one else has to, of paying frequent arbitrary tolls that are not justified. On to some quick refutation. So they argue that the main issue of this project was the security of the people. We disagree. The main issue is which way is the best way to raise the financing necessary for the bridge. It's not the security of the people. The security of the users are not endangered. If they were even close to being endangered, the bridge would not be open to the public. They also talk about, they also justify their project by saying that we need to make a fair choice. We need to make it fair across the population. We think this is extremely immature of the government. They do it in BC. Let's do it in Quebec. Why not? This is extremely immature to rationalize a $30 billion project just because someone else does it. We think Quebec is extremely distinct and that it should take decisions based on its own merit and not what other people are doing. The other thing that was untouched is how they plan to aggressively raise capital. So as my partner mentioned, that this project needs to raise a lot of capital in a very short amount of time, and that toll booths are not the best way to go about this. They have also not touched upon how they're going to deal with the reroutation of traffic, how by tolling the Champlain Bridge, you're going to increase traffic on many other bridges, which defeats the purpose of the bridge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. J'appellerai le deuxième député du gouvernement pour une période de 4 minutes 30 premières secondes protégées.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let's bring this debate back forward to what the real issue is and what the mandate was given to us by the government and why we're here to proudly support it. So what we have here is we have a bridge being built that is extremely urgent, needs to be built because there are safety issues and hazards. The debt financing has already been discussed in different government proposals. However, what the toll is and what the issue is here today is what the benefit of this toll is. Why is the government here proposing a toll? When we talk about the toll, we're talking about the security of the fact of the bridge. But the security not only has the physical infrastructure involved with it, we talk about the financial security of having a constant stream of revenue coming in every year annually with the amount of people who are using this bridge. So what does that exactly mean? When you have some years that you have a surplus of profits from the fact that the toll will be only used for the purpose of re-maintaining and refinancing the bridge, the money can be refocused back into such as maintenance, repairs, or paying off the bridge in itself, which is extremely expensive, as the government has acknowledged too, and the opposition has acknowledged as well too. So this is exactly another benefit, is that we have a source of revenue now coming every year to be able to help pay off the bridge and the repairs. There's a reason why, Mr. Speaker, that we do this in almost every other province. This is not something new. This is not something uncommon. This is not unheard of. This is a very, very normal thing that on bridges and highways you have tolls which help pay off for different expenditures. They brought up this notion, they brought up this one example of the Toronto highway. Well, some of the private highways there and the express ones have had their entire repairs paid off just by one annual stream revenues from the tolls themselves. So if we look at that just as a small example and we take that to a larger scale, we see that this can create huge benefits for the Champlain Bridge. Then we talked about, they came up here and they said, we have not addressed the issue of rerouting traffic. Let's talk about rerouting traffic for a second. As we did mention actually in the second speaker, we talked about the fact that 70% of people would still use the bridge given a $5 toll. The first speaker of the opposition came up and talked about simple economics. Well, if you want to talk about simple economics, let's talk about price elasticity. If 70% of people are willing to still use it at $5, imagine what the amount would be that if at $2 people would still be able to use the bridge. You're going to have an increased amount of people who are still going to want to use this bridge. So that argument is completely invalid. The rerouting of traffic is not going to be an issue because the toll is substantially cheaper than what was already discussed, and that the fact that people have already expressed desire that they will continue to use this bridge. Let's go back to their other point that they brought up. They talked about the families. They talked about in the South Shore that this is a lottery. That's not a lottery. This is a choice that when you decide to go live in the South Shore. And yes, there might be new families who are coming up or even young people who are deciding to go to the South Shore. What is one of the advantages of tolls? Public transportation does not pay for them. And this is another way what we're trying to do is we're encouraging public transportation. If you're heading downtown to Montreal on a busy way, chances are if you're new and also if you're a new starting family, sometimes you will use public transportation to help you get down there. So now you have this whole idea of you don't have this cost barrier that the opposition brought up and told us that we're going to have to deal with because of the fact that we're also encouraging public transportation. Mr. Speaker, what this debate really boils down to and what the essence of this is that what is the benefit of a toll? The benefit of the toll is that not only is it going to help us have a constant stream of revenue, the fact that you're not going to have any of the problems mentioned by the opposition, fair objections to bring up about rerouting traffic because we've already mentioned in our debate that 70% of people still will use it at an increased price. So now we have, at a lesser price, people are still going to be able to use it. And that we're ensuring that this toll has security. And as I mentioned, security does not have to just do with the physical infrastructure that makes people feel safe. It has to do with the financial security of making sure that you have a constant stream of revenue for the bridge. Thank you very much.
J'appelle le deuxième député de l'opposition pour une période de 4 minutes, 30 premières secondes protégées.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to go through all of the side government's points and I'm going to kind of do a systematic refutation of each one and show you why they don't really hold much ground. Now the first point that we heard from side proposition was maintenance and security is important. And they said that, the Champlain Bridge has a lot of problems with it and, we need to fix it and, we need to build this bridge really, really fast because it's not really safe right now. Now, as my partner brought up on side opposition, if you want to build a bridge quickly, you need to raise financing right away. You need to borrow money right away, and a toll in no way, shape, or form helps you build a bridge quickly. Sure, a toll might help you pay back a bridge cost or whatever it is, but I mean, what side government brought up is that it needs to be done so quickly that doesn't really hold much weight here. Their second point that they brought up was this whole notion of like the history of tolls, how tolls used to be here and we took them away. But I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but there's a reason why we took them away in the first place, right? I mean, they were causing a lot of traffic and put simply, people just did not like them. Now, their third point they talked about was fairness. And you know what? It's not very fair that, this is the only bridge that's federally funded or whatnot that does not have a toll on it. But I'd like to ask, Mr. Speaker, whose fairness are we talking about here? Are we talking about the fairness of the people who live on the South Shore who need to use it to cross into Montreal every day? Are we talking about the people who live in other Canadian provinces who, their big concern has always been, oh, that Champlain Bridge doesn't have a toll on it, right? Because that's something that really bothers the rest of Canadians a lot. Now, what we've really been bringing forward here on side opposition is that, well, let's say you put a toll on a bridge, there are going to be alternate crossings that are going to happen. And what we brought up, and like what they never really refuted, is they just said, well, there's a toll, and like we have studies that say that, people are going to go on it. And they said, well, 70% of people are going to stay and keep on using the bridge if we put a toll on it. But, Mr. Speaker, something around 150,000 people use the Champlain Bridge each and every single day. Now, let's say only 30% of them find alternate routes into the city. Alternate routes, which I might add, are already very packed and very jam-packed with traffic all the time, and whose condition is in not much better shape than the Champlain Bridge. You're creating much more logjam in these other areas, and you're not really addressing this whole notion of security either, because now you're just forcing more people to not be on that really safe new bridge that we built with all this money that we borrowed, but we're forcing them, 30% of people, which is not insignificant, 30% of 150,000. You're forcing them to, go onto these old poor bridges when, the big new bridge is there, but, people don't need to use it. What side proposition seems to believe is that, quality is important. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you have the best bridge in the world if people aren't using it, and that's what we're standing for here on side opposition. Now, our second point that we're bringing forward is this whole notion of discrimination. And let's face it, there's reasons why people go to live on the South Shore. Often, it's less expensive than buying a house in the city of Montreal. They go there, for the open areas for their kids and whatnot. And they make these decisions for very important reasons. And the people who live there, it's a very growing, emerging neighborhood. They're young, they've just gone out of university, they're having their first kids, they're buying their first houses. And what does the government do for these young people who live in the South Shore? Well, we give them incentives for buying their first house, tax incentives when they have their first kids. We give the people who live in this area all kinds of tax incentives, yet at the same time now we're just going to tax them again because, they live in an area where a lot of kids and young families are, and they have to go into Montreal to work. So we don't really think that holds much weight. We think that's pretty contradictory, that the very people that, we're giving all these incentives to, all these tax incentives to, while we're saying, oh, we're going to tax you. Now, our third and final point was this whole notion of public approval. And the fact of the matter is, most people in Montreal do not want a toll on the bridge. We pay enough already for these bridges, for our road construction. We have taxes on gas that are very specific to drivers. We have tax on registration, tax on our licenses. If we want to make people use public transit or whatever else, increase gas taxes, do other things. You don't have to target this certain segment of the population. For these reasons, we are proud to oppose.
J'appelle le chef du gouvernement, Premier ministre, pour la clôture, pour une période de 3 minutes entièrement protégée.
Mr. Speaker, let's take a step back and look at what we discussed here today. I also want to touch a bit upon the points that the opposition were not able to address. The opposition has deviated this debate and made this a question of construction corruption when the debate that we are standing here today is about the installation of a toll on the Champlain Bridge and not about any type of construction corruption. The opposition has also compared the safety of our people to tuition strikes by stating that people will not be willing to pay for a new toll because they have opposed to tuition fees. Mr. Speaker, we have facts that prove that 70% of the population would be willing to pass this bridge should there be a $5 toll. The opposition also has strengthened the need for this bridge, saying that the geographic lottery makes these people dependent on this bridge. And because they are so dependent, we need to ensure the security and safety of this bridge, which is what we are doing here today. The opposition also does not understand the cost of a bridge, Mr. Speaker. We're looking at $3 to $5 billion, whereas they mentioned that the bridge would cost up to $30 to $50 billion. We have also talked about the security of our citizens, and the opposition never touched upon that. How can we ensure the safety of our citizens when currently it is not working? Mr. Speaker, the status quo is not working here today, and we need to change it. We have found a solution to the constant reparation needs and the frequent problems with the current bridge by installing this toll on the new bridge. How can we ensure security, Mr. Speaker? By installing tolls on our new bridge. We have also reinsured and addressed the deviation of traffic by by creating the $2 toll, So let me take you through the main arguments here today. We want to ensure the adequate maintenance of the new infrastructure. We want to make sure that we fix the error that we had done in the past by removing the tolls. We also would like to be a uniform country and make sure that all citizens of Canada have the same, are in the same situation by paying the tolls on the bridge. We have a solid implementation by lowering the amount of money, by creating a $2 toll instead of a $5 toll, which we are very confident that won't deviate much traffic, which makes this motion very viable. This money that we are making will go back to the sole maintenance of the bridge, which is a very solid foundation to our motion here today. Mr. Speaker, the opposition has tried to sidetrack this House today by bringing up entirely irrelevant arguments and exaggerating facts. We cannot allow these antics to stall this House. This motion must pass here today, and it will. Thank you.
Je laisse la parole au chef de l'opposition pour une période de 3 minutes entièrement protégée.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think this government here made an important concession at the beginning of the debate, which is the reason they've lost this debate today. So they say under their side of the House, they're also going to have public debt to finance this bridge, and so are we. So at the end of the day, we're going to have the bridge built, we're going to have the infrastructure built. The question then becomes, how do we get the most use of the money we actually invest in the bridge, and how we actually pay for it? And on those two grounds, I think side opposition has clearly won the debate today. So firstly, let's talk about this idea of usefulness of the bridge, right? We heard like an unnamed source from side proposition continually say this like 70% statistic, like 70% of people will still use the bridge. And Evan brought up a really important contention to this in his speech. Even if the figure is correct and only 30% of people choose to take alternate highways into the city, what that causes is an immense, like an unsustainable amount of congestion on these bridges, as Evan talked about, and we heard no response to that, right? Even if the figure that they claim like incredibly supports their case is true, the fact of the matter is we don't think the infrastructure in Quebec can handle that kind of redirection, right? What's important about that, Mr. Speaker, is when you get that level of congestion, what you actually do is you create a harm to the economy of Montreal overall. That's part of the argument I brought up in my speech that we heard no response to. And especially when the government gets most of its money from tax revenue, you can imagine how few, like if we have a harm to the economy, we're going to get less tax revenue overall in the first place, which is going to harm our ability to pay for the bridge in the long run, right? We think, like, we proposed to you several different methods of paying for this bridge. We told you about public-private partnerships. We told you about increased taxes on gasoline or vehicle registration. And we talked to you about the increased benefit to the economy that comes from an untolled bridge, all of which are ways to fund the Champlain Bridge, which don't actually incur the harms that we presented to you, right? Under our plan, you don't get the amount of congestion on the Champlain Bridge and other bridges that you would otherwise. You don't get an unfair treatment of people living in the South Shore who've already signed their mortgage, who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and don't necessarily have the economic viability to move away, right? These new families, for example, who don't have the money in their budget to afford this toll. And even if the toll is $2 a day, over a working year, that's anywhere between $800 to $1,000 a year, right? That's $800 to $1,000 less of food on the table. That's $1,000 less of books or school supplies for your children. Ultimately, that's a significant financial impairment for these people. Ultimately, we've presented to you a more thorough and nuanced model of how we can actually finance this bridge, which not only provides a better economic stability for the city of Montreal, but provides more usefulness of the bridge. Fundamentally, we think once we're spending, whether it's $5 billion or $30 billion or however much, it's significant, and we should make sure this bridge is going to be the best it possibly can be. And the best way we use this bridge is not by impairing people's ability to access the bridge by charging a toll. That's why we're proud to oppose. Thank you.
Merci aux deux dernières équipes. Alors, je vous demanderai bien de vouloir quitter dans le calme et la sécurité de la salle. De même qu'à l'hôpital.
Are you close to